Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Nadine Dorries. Nadine was first elected as Member of Parliament for Mid-Bedfordshire in the 2005 general election with a majority of 11,355 votes. By the 2017 general election, her majority had increased to 20,983 votes. Now, Nadine is somewhat far from being a Conservative identikit Member of Parliament. She was born in Liverpool, worked as a trainee nurse and founded Company Kids Limited, which provided child daycare for working parents, a company which she sold before entering Parliament. Norman Tebbit once told me that as a backbench Member of Parliament in the 1970s, he would feel that he had a very slack week indeed if he failed to get coverage in any of the national press. Today, many backbench MPs are worthy but largely anonymous figures. Nadine bucks that trend. And she is also a very prominent figure on social media. In 2012, Nadine opposed the government's legislation to introduce same-sex marriage. She is also a member of the social conservative group Cornerstone. In 2012, she described David Cameron and George Osborne as two arrogant posh boys who don't know the price of milk and show no passion to understand the lives of others. Nadine has been a consistent and forceful advocate of Britain's need to leave the European Union. In 2013, she suggested that UKIP and the Conservative Party should run joint candidates in the 2015 general election. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please give a warm welcome to Nadine Dorries, Member of Parliament.
Thank you, Barry. I have to say I cringed most of the way through that introduction. It's when someone reads your political history back to you, you think, oh no, did I really say that? And actually, I have to say, I've been asked tonight to come here and speak about immigration. I think when a request to speak anywhere about immigration lands in MPs' inbox, most MPs press the delete button because there lies the path to ruin and destruction. And in fact, if you looked at the debate last week when Caroline Flint gave a very good speech in which she spoke about immigration, there were calls of racist, and she took a fair bit of some unparliamentary language and quite a beating from some people on our side, I'm embarrassed to say. And of course, when we were campaigning about, do you want to take that one down? Because I think we didn't need that one, yeah. Okay. So, when we were campaigning to leave the European Union, for me, immigration was an issue. Because I don't understand how, if you don't control of your borders, you can't control your economy. And if you don't control of your borders, how you can deal with some of the issues which are blighting the lives of ordinary people in the UK, people who grew up with me on my council estate in Liverpool, because you can't tackle housing and you can't tackle the NHS if you have uncontrolled immigration and you aren't aware of the numbers that are coming into the UK to use your public services and to live in houses. So for me, it was all inextricably linked together as one. Ruth, can I just say that before I carry on, I don't know if you probably don't remember, but you and I first met 18 years ago in Manchester at a dinner in a hotel, quite a small dinner, organised by Kay Coleman, and it was organised by an organisation called Business for Sterling. Yeah. And at the time, it was when I just sold my business and I became involved, we were fighting then to save the pound. And when I was listening to you speak, I thought, my gosh, all those years ago we were fighting to save the pound and not get into the euro. Now we're leaving to get out of the European Union. And I don't think I would have believed then, if somebody had said to me, well, we can also get out of the European Union, I wouldn't have thought that we could actually do that. And yet here we are today, 18 years later. We're not fighting to keep our currency, we're fighting to get out of the whole body of the European Union. And Graham, can I just pay tribute to Graham before I continue as well? Because Graham's been a hero. And I know how difficult it is when you're voting against the largest part of your party in Parliament. It takes a hero to do that, because you are ostracised to a degree. You do lose friends. It is very difficult. You are under pressure from the whips. You do receive difficulty in your local association when you go back home to your constituency. So Graham and other people like him are actually heroes in Parliament, because they are in a party. To use the words of both Jacob Rees-Mogg recently and Dominic Grieve this morning, you are a servant of Parliament, Graham. And I also agree with Graham on the, 2008 and 2011, I fought for the Lords. They asked me to be on their side and to fight against reform, and I did, but I would not do that now, because they have proven themselves unworthy. I thought we needed checks and balances, a second chamber. I put forward the arguments, if it is not broken, don't fix it. These people have more qualifications than we have vice-chancellors and scientists and medics and people with a lifetime of experience in the Lords. Why would we want to throw that out? Well, I think we know why now. And that is because the House of Lords has changed. It's been stuffed full to unworkable numbers with people who really have no right to be there, and they do need to face radical reform. So, as I said, the words Brexit and immigration are inextricably linked. Not only in terms of the economy and everything else, but also in public discourse. If you speak to, and I give a number of speeches over the year and since the referendum, if you speak to people about why they voted to leave, immigration is always in there. It's always an issue. But people aren't racist, but they're accused of being racist. You know, when I trained as a nurse in Liverpool and in Warrington, not far from where you were born actually, Ruth, when I trained to be a nurse in the 1970s, I trained with a cohort of nurses who were from the Philippines, and they made fantastic nurses. They were not only lovely people, they were hard-working, lovely people. We can't get nurses in from the Philippines now. That just doesn't happen. We can't get nurses in from the Commonwealth. You don't see that anymore. And for me, we all look back to our personal experiences, don't we? And for me to deny those people from those Commonwealth countries who have skills, who want to bring their skills to the UK, to benefit from the UK and to also benefit us, was fundamentally wrong. Hardly any smug Remainer can pass by the opportunity to claim that those people who voted to leave the EU and name immigration as a reason, they call us racist, xenophobic, and those are the people, these racists and xenophobes, that brought about this historic referendum victory. That's the rhetoric of people like Emily Thornberry, where patriotism is only ever a thin veil for something different, something darker and something deeply distasteful, something that we should all be ashamed of. And that is why politicians would refuse to come and talk about immigration, because it's something we should be ashamed to even talk about or address. This view of people like Miss Thornberry and others assumes that Brexit is about reducing immigration to next to nothing. It even assumes that Brexit is a rejection of foreigners altogether and the creation of a little Britain. Well, it isn't the creation of a little Britain, it's the creation of a great Britain. A Britain that can control its economy and be back up in the table of one of the top economic forces in the world. It's not about a little Britain. If you are exhausted and sick to death of hearing people say despite Brexit, I am sick to the back people telling me I'm a little Britain person. I am the opposite of a little Britain. I want a great Britain. There is also a view that assumes that there is a bigotry at the heart of the Brexit movement, and it simply isn't there. It looks as people at numbers, purely as numbers. You'll hear numbers bandied around as targets and people, illegal immigrants and immigrants, and they're not numbers, they're people, and they're people with skills. And people with skills are people we need to attract. Because, and I do, so even with people who voted leave, I come across this issue sometimes, and some of you may express it here tonight. You see, I don't think we are going to reduce immigration massively, because if our economy is going to grow, if we are going to be a country which becomes a tech island, which we have skills in research and development, I've had all sorts of areas where in technology where the UK can actually benefit with its skill base and become one of the forces in the world. If we are going to become this huge economy, we need immigration. But we need the right immigration. We need to control our borders and have people with skills who will fill the gaps that we need to function as the kind of economy we want to. But what we don't need is unskilled labour, white unskilled labour, pouring into the UK from the European Union. That's what we don't. We need full control of our immigration. Now, some people who voted leave tell me, oh, no, we need to bring down our immigration numbers. And of course we do. But it's the type of immigration numbers that we need to bring down. And as I said, it's not about numbers, it's about people. And if we're going to grow as an economy, we may find that immigration increases. But it will be people on visas, people who will be here to fulfill a role, people who will be here to fulfill a skill and bring their skills to us, like the doctors and the nurses, when you heard Jeremy Hunt lift the cap this week. You know, it's not just the Brexit dividend we've had allocated to the NHS. We've also heard Jeremy Hunt decide to remove the cap so we can bring in from our Commonwealth countries the doctors and the nurses we need. Actually, some people could argue Brexit is already happening. On one point, the naysayers are correct. Brexit will revolutionise immigration into the UK, and not just the way they think. For too long, we've had an open border for low-skilled migrants, as I've just said, from one part of the world, white low-skilled migrants, while we turned away highly skilled people. That's going to change. For too long, we turned our back on the Commonwealth. I remember as a little girl going out in the playground on Commonwealth Day, and we were all given Union Jack flags, and we all sang songs and we celebrated the Commonwealth. That will do that again. That's going to change. And for too long, we were tied to the EU, a failing relic of the last century, instead of seeking new relationships with the major powers of the future. That's going to change as well. We are now leaving the EU, and that means leaving the single market and the customs union. And we are no longer going to have to agree to the principle of free movement across our borders, the EU citizens. We are going to take back control of our borders, but we're not closing them. And that is an important point. And that is the point that Remainers, you will frequently hear make on the radio and in debates and in speeches like this. They will speak as though we are closing the doors and we are going to become a little Britain. That just simply is not true. And it's one of the vast rhetoric of lies that are spoken when people talk about leaving the European Union. For the first time in decades, we will soon have a skills-based immigration policy. A policy decided in London, not in Brussels, where we can decide who comes into the country based on what the economy needs. So the NHS is important to me, and it does need more doctors and nurses. But also, universities need more academics. Our civil society needs more engineers. The city will always need more lawyers. It doesn't matter what race, religion, colour, creed, nationality, sexuality, gender identity people are. If these people have the skills that we need to grow our economy as a country, they should be and will be welcome. We may still need some unskilled migrants from the EU as well. Agriculture is one industry concerned about being able to fill their post after Brexit. If there's a demand, then the immigration system must enable supply. In fact, they are the important words, aren't they? Demand and supply, supply and demand. That's how flexible we have to become. But of course, we're not flexible with our policy at the moment in the EU. It's absolutely rigid. It breaks my heart to read about how New Zealand felt cast aside by the UK when we entered what became the EU, and centuries of cultural links were forgotten on our part. Thankfully, we will be able to restore that relationship post-Brexit. Earlier this year, we heard about mistakes made, unfortunate mistakes made with regards to the Windrush era migrants to the UK from Commonwealth countries in the Caribbean. Absolutely dreadful. Thankfully, that will be restored. Our relationship with the Caribbean, I hope and pray, will be restored again. But these were the people who came over and actually managed transport for London. It would never have run without the people in the Windrush generation who came over from the Caribbean countries. That will be fixed. And then we come to the future. The next century's giant, economic giant, China. While successful EU states like Germany and Holland struggle to cope with 21st century while shackled to basket-case economies elsewhere in Europe, and no one can put that better than Ruth did, so I'm going to skip past the next paragraph, we will be forging new partnerships with giants in the Far East. We have just heard this week how Germany is having to resort to paying EU states and other countries in the neighbourhood to try and stem the flow of refugees. How appalling is it when that's the situation as a country? Because you refuse to adapt or to change your policy, that's the position you find yourself in. If only they could assert some control over their borders. If only they could choose their migrants who come into Germany based on their skills. If only they could develop cultural links instead of benefit dependency. They can't because they're staying in the EU. We can because we're leaving. Brexit will mean a revolution for immigration to the UK. We will build a high-skilled workforce from across the globe. We are not just building Brexit Britain, we are building global Britain. And I think that's where I'm going to end, because immigration is a difficult topic to talk about because of the attitudes of the Remainers. What I would like to say, though, is that tomorrow is a very important day. Graham has touched on it. I hope and pray that there will be enough Grahams in the Labour Party, that Graham and people like, I'm not going to name any names actually, but some of the others that I know have been working today, that they can get the numbers to come into our lobbies with us. Because, as Graham said, please don't underestimate the importance of that vote tomorrow. Because if this meaningful vote carries, it isn't really a meaningful vote. It is a tool by which to call a vote a motion of confidence in the government. And as wonderful as Graham and his colleagues are, if there was ever a vote in Parliament that boiled down to being a confidence motion in the Prime Minister, which is what, Graham, I think it would come to if we reached that point that Parliament had to exercise that vote. If Parliament didn't want the deal or had to vote on whatever deal the Prime Minister comes back with, if it is a confidence motion in the Prime Minister and could lead to a general election, I do not believe our Labour colleagues will support us. And of course they won't, because at the end of the day, it's politics. And if it's a meaningful vote becomes a confidence motion, I don't think they will support it and we will be in trouble. So And with all the best will in the world, I think even Graham would find it difficult to come into the lobbies with us on that basis. So tomorrow is more important than you think. I will keep my words about our own MPs on my side to myself. I've got myself into trouble for saying what I think should happen to them. But you know, they did stand on a manifesto of being re-elected, delivering this. They did say, we honour the vote of the 17.4 million people. They did say, we will stand as MPs to deliver Brexit. And by this vote tomorrow, which is a duplicitous and mendacious vote, it is there, this meaningful vote, whatever you hear, and I know Dominic Rees sounded very reasonable on the radio today, whatever you hear, that vote is there to frustrate the Brexit process, to halt it if it can, which is actually impossible because Article 50 has already been triggered, to move towards a second referendum, or to have a confidence motion in the Prime Minister. Almost no good at all can come from it, because as I said, it will rapidly turn into a confidence motion. Nobody wants another general election. I've never met anybody. Is there anyone in this room who wants another general election? I've never met anybody yet who's put their hand up for that. No one wants another general election, but we might be forced into that situation. So that is why I hope, Graham, we get enough of you in our lobbies. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. Yes, thank you very much.